Okay, if we can start, just be good to understand, your background, how you got into the IT industry. Is it something you've always wanted to do, or some people arrive by accident, some people it's always been on, their what they wanted to do. So yeah, just how you arrived in the industry.
So I guess I've always been circling around it in some way or other. Um, so I'm kind of a firm believer. I think from my very early days, I always felt that, technology has this transformative power to take drudgery out of our lives. And I always feel that, if we have to do something better, we have to remove drudgery, and technology is one of those levers. And for that very reason, I've been sort of circling around this for a while. I wouldn't say I was a part of the IT industry per se. I come more from the, consultative background. So I come from advisory background and industry. And I kind of, started my career in supply chain actually, and worked there for a while. And then I moved on to consulting in Deloitte. And then what happened was that there I started consulting with a lot of technology, media, telecommunications, telecom, other companies. And that's how I sort of got more into technology domain. And that's when I started understanding the problems, because you were always advising to the CXOs. And that's when I started to, see the power of it, really, the transformative power of how people were leveraging this. And this was also back in the Silicon Valley in its heyday. So it was a perfect time, I think, perfect storm. So that's when I started kind of getting, more involved in it. And then since I was doing a lot of advisory work, when I came back to India, so I was in the US for many years. And when I wanted to come back to India, I wanted to solve problems that were more Indian, So I said that what's the point of coming to India and solving the problems that I was solving in the US? So I ended up I ended up being the CEO of a company or an advisory firm, but that was in the space of inclusive development and sustainability. And I thought that I was solving challenges of sustainability and inclusive development, but as you would imagine, technology has a huge role to play even there in, ensuring a more equitable and inclusive world. So again, the foray into technology began from there. And I was there for almost 10 years. And after that, I sort of, left that. I thought that I should do something on my own. And I started, a company which was AI based company, giving insights which are more AI based. So I ran that for about 3 or 4 years. We finally kind of, wrapped that up. And I was all throughout this time when I was in India, I was on the boards of different companies, and Subex was one of those boards. So I was an independent director on Subex's board for 8 years. And I was looking at Subex's journey, but I would say more from outside in. And it was always fascinating to me because it was a little, the sector itself is something that I understood. But the company itself had its own share of challenges. So it was a great learning for me. And when I was on the board, and my predecessor CEO, when he was stepping down, that at that point of time, the board members kind of looked at me and they said, "Look, you have seen the company, you know what it has done, you know what the challenges are. And you kind of come from similar background. So are you willing to sort of, put all of this together and take on this challenge and go to the executive role?" Now that's a transition not many people make, from going from boards to executive. It's usually the other way around. Um, so I was a little bit skeptical, but I thought that, it would be a good challenge actually to come back into the role and see. So here I am. It's been, I think, 10 months, 9 or 10 months to date. I took over in May of 2023. And then, I've been here since then. So it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah, and in terms of your current role, what have you say you've been there for a fairly short while, but what have you managed to do since arriving, or has it been very much sort of watching and fully? Obviously, you've been on the board, so I guess you've got a fairly good idea of the company. But have you still sort of watched a little bit before you start doing any major changes, or yeah, just what have you been up to since you took over?
I think what I've been up to is primarily, I think I almost think of it as like, stock taking, right? You see it from the board, you know what the challenges are, but you quite don't know why those exist, or what the genesis of that is and how can you solve those. So I think since I've been here, my primarily, I would say, I spent good first 6 months just trying to understand the business more closely, spend time with the customers, get feedback on the products, but more importantly, do an internal stock taking, right? Of where is it that, where are we going wrong? Or what is it that we are doing right? So what do we need to retain from, past? And what is it that really needs to firmly change as we go forward? So I think that's the kind of direction that I've been trying to set. And I think going into the next year, which is, for us in India, financial year starts in April. I think going into next year, I have it more in my mind as to what changes. But I have made changes along the way. Quite a few changes I've already made. But I think now I'm a little bit more sure-footed about where we need to be. So it's been a process of discovery and learning, actually.
And in terms of the picking up on that sort of discovery and learning and also challenges along the way, it'd just be good to understand during your career and, to arriving where you are today, just the challenges you've maybe come across. And I'm just wondering, would you classify those as normal business challenges that everyone, or have you encountered certain things because you're a female in, I mean, obviously the IT industry is very male dominated, but you'd say more in consulting, but that's still the case where there are more males and females, just challenges, and I say anything that may or may not have been to do with your, being a woman in a man's world, if you like, in business.
I think some of them were usual business challenges, but I think I think that somewhere the rules are at workplace, be it consulting, be it IT, they have been set by men, right? Because like you rightly said, it's male dominated. So what happens is that what constitutes a good performance, what is competence? I think all these things have been defined from a lens which is very, I would say, it's always been men, right, that have been defining it. And I would say in terms of challenges, in early stages of my career, I almost felt that I had to be one of the boys uh, to sort of, break through. You could, you might be psychologically different, you might be physiologically different, but you dare not bring any of that into work. It's almost like, you have to live out of a suitcase. You have to get going. You have to show up for a meeting. It doesn't matter what you're going through. So I think it's one of those things where that's where I think the challenges in early stages of my career, I felt that, you had to almost leave your gender behind. You have to almost, leave it aside and not come across as, you might have any challenges that are specific to you as, belonging to this other gender. So I think those were the challenges that I initially thought that, and I think it continues till this date. I see, younger girls. I mean, it's the same thing. I see it all over again. It continues. I don't think we have managed to make it a very inclusive workplace. But I think it's also got to do with representation, right? There aren't as many women actually in leadership roles. So there is a lack of representation, and that reflects actually in everything that happens. So I would say those were the challenges in early parts, the stages of career, but then you learn to navigate it as you grow older, I guess. You have some gray hair, you learn to navigate it. So, but I would say, yeah, it continues.
And
And gender biases, right? So
yeah,
stereotypes.
and did you encounter help and some mentors along the way, or was it very much your own self navigating this, or were there any role models or people that helped you, along your career path, whether it's just generally again in business or with any specific challenges?
I think I don't kind of I never really got time to get involved in any sort of the She network or the other industry networks and stuff. But my mentorship also came more. I think first of all I was lucky. I had really good bosses. I have to thank them. I'm all men, but really good. They sort of kept pushing me out of my comfort zone. Sometimes much not to my liking, but they did the job. I think somewhere they pushed me and I took on the challenge, and I kept moving. So I think in that sense I lucked out somewhere. But I think in terms of mentorship, I've always found good mentors to come from, not from the organization that I was with. I've always found mentors outside of work, and those are the mentors that really helped me sort of find my way in this world, in sort of what are the conversations you should be having, what are the tough conversations I must be having with superiors or bosses to make my voice heard. So I got a lot of this kind of advice on the projects to take or things to stay away from. All this advice actually I got from people who were not were working where I was. It was always outside of that. So I would say my mentorship has been more productive, and I found mentors in from different walks of life than from people who were actually I was working with. So it worked wonderfully for me, but I that model has worked better for me because I feel that they are a little bit more unbiased, and I can also be open about my fears, my aspirations, and all that without the fear of judgment. So for me, that mentorship model has worked better.
And in terms of the overall scenario, have you noticed during your career that there has been a gradual improvement, at least in attitudes to whether it's women in the workplace or other or minorities? Do you think things have slowly got better, or do you not notice much progress?
I think it's better in the sense that I do see a lot more women in tech now than I used to see earlier. So I would say definitely the scenario is getting better. But I think if you globally look at it, it's only about 10% of women CEOs, right? So what happens is the lack of representation is a key challenge. You have women in tech, but you don't have them in leadership positions. You don't have them as CEOs. You don't have them as CTOs, right? So that's still extremely underrepresented. So I think that hasn't gotten better at all, and that needs to get better. And I think also in terms of respect, I see a lot of women, but I don't see that much respect actually. It's almost like it's easy to sort of, talk them down. I see it. Sometimes I see it even in day to day, and I'm actually shocked at it, because I guess I've moved on from that stage of my life. So it actually comes as a shock to me when I see it today. So I think some of those things, I would say attitudes still need to change, because while there are a lot more women, the inherent biases haven't gone away. I wouldn't say that they have, entirely disappeared, and we have a lot of work to do there.
And in terms of any sort of lessons you might have learned along your career to share again, whether that's just for people generally, business things you've encountered and lessons you've learned, or again being a woman in the industry, just any advice to other females in their careers, just I say lessons learned and anything to share from those.
I think maybe two things. First, I think, and I was given this advice and it has really served me well. I think one is um, women need to learn how to have difficult conversations. I think they generally, they do shy away from difficult conversations, be it in terms of a, race. It could be in terms of a promotion. It could be in terms of, getting on the right projects, visibility, whatever it is, right? Um, I think you need to kind of, speak up a lot more. You need to have that difficult conversation. They find it difficult to sort of be assertive. And I think that's one thing that we need to do a lot of. And we need to kind of have those conversations. We should not shy away from those. That's the progress, that's growth. I think the second one is, and I've seen this with women, I've seen it, with my peers. I think somewhere you have to fit life into your career. So what happens is women sort of think in terms of, this is where I tell women that you should think more like men. Because when men get married, they don't think that their career is going to get stopped. When they have kids, they don't think that their career is going to take a hit. And somewhere for women, all the, when life events happen, the big life events, the career somewhere seems to, come into question in terms of, will it, there is a motherhood penalty. There is a lot of other things that women, and I think somewhere we need to kind of lose that in our mind. You have to fit, you should not think that any kind of life event is going to stall your career in any way. I think you have to keep pushing forward. And I think somewhere we do disservice to ourselves when we do that. And I think somewhere that's where I really think that you should think like men and keep pushing forward. Do not stop. Do not think that it's even a point of conversation. Just like, men just generally declare, well, I had a child. That's what it is, Maybe you took 3 months break, but then so what? You move back, you move back in and you make your, you take your position back in. So I think somewhere some of those things we have to be a little bit more assertive about. I think I see a lot of that, at least in India. And I think somewhere that has to break.
And now you are where you're at, do you feel a particular responsibility to help improve the workplace for women and minorities? Or are you're happy within your own company to do stuff, but just your thoughts as to whether you think folks like
No,
yourself
absolutely.
having got to the top of the tree feel a responsibility, or you just carry on doing what you're doing and hope some of it filters down.
No. I think we have a huge responsibility, because I feel that we need a tribe. We need to help our tribe, because we have been through this grind, right? We know what it is, what it takes to get here. And I think we have to help our tribe. We have to help other women at the workplace. I think again, hiring right. And for me, it means that, your funnel has to be wider. So when you actually start hiring, even at the starting positions, right, freshers, your funnel has to be much wider for women, because the number of women who are going to make it through that funnel are actually quite few. So if you don't have your funnel right, you will never have the output actually. So if you only do 10 intake, you are not going to get women in the boardrooms eventually, right? Where are they going to come from? You need a lot more intake actually. So I think in some ways, I have sort of, started working on those things, that your funnel must be right. You must be kind of, doing I mean, I can't say it's entirely free of bias, but you must be doing, more fair judging, appraisals, more fair evaluations. There shouldn't be a motherhood penalty. If anything, I think we have started a program which actually encourages women to come back into workforce. It's very, very important to keep them on. So I think some of those things are very important to keep a more inclusive workplace. And also, women may need flexibility at different stages of their career. So do men, actually, I think. So I think generally having a more flexible workplace is good. Actually, it's healthy for everyone. And it shouldn't be that, women require more flexibility than men. In fact, if anything, I've seen men use a lot more flexibility than women, actually. Even as I speak today at Subex. So I think we shouldn't make that about a gender conversation at all, actually. Flexibility is flexibility. You might need it for any life event, and we should be able to afford it. We should be able to provide it to people. So that's how I think about it. And I feel, again, talking a lot to the younger girls that come into the workforce, right? Talking to them, telling them what were the challenges that I faced so that they don't have to go through it. Of course, I feel everyone goes through their own grind, but in any which way that we can help them, be seen a lot more, be heard, to be heard. I try to do all that, but I think we have a huge responsibility. All of us who got here have a responsibility to pull rest of them here. So absolutely, I think goes without saying.
Do you think, I mean, I know the pandemic, which is almost in the dim and distant past, changed the way people work. Do you think one of the few benefits of it was potentially that it encouraged much more flexible working, which plays into the, as you say,
Yeah.
helping women who are perhaps traditionally, thought once they're married, children, etc., but people can work much more flexibly. That's presumably a really good thing for everyone.
That's a really good thing. It has happened, and I'm almost disappointed that companies are trying to reverse this now, saying that, we need to go back to 5 days of work, 5 days a week. But although we have enough evidence that productivity doesn't really drop sharply when that happens, even if you have people at work, versus when people work remotely, they are happier, they have more control over their time and their schedules. So I don't know why this whole movement. So I'm a little bit disappointed, honestly, and I'm very glad that we are not doing that at Subex. And I don't really plan to do that either. There are some jobs that require that, but bulk of it, no, actually. So, and we should provide the flexibility.
And just in before we finish, it'd be good to understand for those that don't know a little bit more about your, the company, what it is it actually does, and just your thoughts as to plans for the future as well for the company.
So Subex is actually, so we were one of the first, and I would say the early product companies out of India. So what we do is we create revenue assurance, fraud management kind of software for, it's a product. We create software for telcos globally. And we almost have 75 to 80% of telcos, that are our clients. So this is what we primarily do. So we are on this, product journey where we have now, embraced AI, and we have embraced, the 5G. 5G is going to be a big, lever that of growth for telcos. So what we are trying to do is to develop AI and 5G products for the future. So this is where we are kind of headed as Subex. We want to be able to serve our clients and their needs, but hopefully a lot more efficiently with cutting edge products in 5G and AI. So that's really the future that I'm driving towards right now.
Well, that's exciting, as you say, exciting because AI, everyone's talking about that. There's a massive potential, and 5G. I mean, I know it's beginning to happen. I mean, where I happen to live,
It is beginning to happen.
sometimes I don't even get 3G, let alone 4G. But so there's a long way to go. But the potential will be realised at some stage. It's going to be a game changer when it does arrive in, if we say, critical mass. Is that right?
Yeah, 5G is actually going to be huge because a lot of cases, use cases that telcos will be able to orchestrate are, it's amazing, what it can do. Like you can have a private 5G network for hospitals. You can have a private 5G network for a manufacturing facility. So you can do a lot with 5G. So there are a lot of enterprise use cases, which is what we are banking on to create products for them. So.
And just finally, in terms of companies that are looking at their inclusivity and understanding perhaps that they have a way to go, have you any thoughts, one or two bits of advice, how either how they start on the journey, or hopefully they've all started, but just one or two pointers as to things to consider along the way to make sure that they are truly inclusive and not biased?
It's a tough one, Phil. It's really a tough one, tough nut to crack. Culture is tough nut to crack because I feel that every employee that comes in comes with their own biases, baggages, and they are a product of their experiences, right? So it's a very difficult thing to say that, leave everything behind and, this is how we work. So I think it's a little bit of a tough nut to crack, but in my opinion, I think what we can do is encourage a lot more open discourse. I think that's more important. A culture, I feel that you can never have a culture which you say is going to be non-judgmental. It's simply not going to happen. But what we can do is encourage curiosity. We can encourage a lot more conversation, and we can encourage a lot more, you know, dialogue actually. And I think that's where it probably helps. And you should have mixed gender teams. You should have mixed gender projects. Um, and when by mixed gender, I say not just women, right? Other genders. So whatever, that really truly creates inclusive workplaces, because that's when people are forced to work with other people, right? You must have to, I almost feel that sometimes you have to orchestrate situations which, force people to open their mind. Sometimes you have to just force interactions. And, the company should actively look to do that actually, and actively kind of, I think that's the only way. I really don't know, because it's hard actually. It's a hard one. It's not an easy one to create an inclusive workplace, because I can say I'm inclusive, but are all my employees inclusive? Does a person who come in feel that, they are seen? That's the test of inclusiveness, right? My saying that we are inclusive is not the test. The test is someone comes in and feels that they are seen, they are heard. And that's a tough one, actually. And that means it's not just in my control, right? Everyone has to respond a certain way. And I think that's one thing that we really have to work on.
Okay, I mean, it's been lovely to chat, and you've shared
Yeah.
some great insights into the world of work and inclusivity. So Nisha, I really appreciate your time. Thank you
Thank you
very
so
much.
much. Really
Yeah.
appreciate it.